Is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to be here with our friends from ZAMI NOBLA, and specifically the ZAMI NOBLA Podcast. We are here with Angela Denise Davis, who is the show's creator, producer, and host. Angela is up here on the left. And it is the sound source for Black lesbians 40 and older. The show's topics include current events, LGBT affairs, Black lesbian history, and health and wellness. And you can find out more at the link I'm going to drop in the chat for our virtual friends. But we're here today in celebration of our friend Sheree L. Greer's 10th anniversary edition of Once and Future Lovers. Karis celebrated Once and Future Lovers when it first dropped 10 years ago. We get a brand new, beautiful cover edition. That's right, hold it up so everybody can see. And we're so excited for Sheree. So Sheree is a writer living in Tampa, Florida. In 2014, she founded Kitchen Table Literary Arts to support and showcase the work of BIPOC women and femme-identified writers and poets. She is the author of 2 novels, Let the Lover Be and Return to Arms, and a short story collection that we are celebrating now, Once and Future Lovers. Her work has been published in Les Talk Anthology, on Very Smart Brothers, on Autostraddle, the Windy City Times, and the Windy City Queer Anthology, Dispatches from the Third Coast. Sheree is a Vona Voices alum, Estrella grantee, as well as a Yaddo and Ragdale Fellow. Her essay, Bars, published in Fourth Genre magazine, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize and notably named in Best American Essays 2019. So y'all put your hands together and welcome Sheree L. Greer and Angela Denise Davis.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful Sunday afternoon this is. Isn't it wonderful? Yeah. I have my sunglasses on because of the light, which can be very unkind to my optic nerves. But I would have had to warn them anyway, just because I'm with someone who is as cool as Sheree L. Greer. Cool. Nice. The brilliance is just illuminating the space. And I know that for a fact because this is the second time we've had an opportunity to sit and be in conversation together. The first was in the fall of 2018.
It was that long ago? I was trying to remember.
It was
I knew
that
it was
long
pre-pandemic,
ago.
but
you were one of the first guest of the ZAMI NOBLA Podcast, the sound source for Black lesbian history. Nice. And we had you there, and it was just wonderful. We talked about Return to Arms, which was out and had just an incredible conversation. So I know we're going to have an incredible one today as well. Right on. And we have something special we're going to share with you before the evening is over, in addition. Why don't we start by celebrating your work and hearing you read something for us?
All right. Okay. I'm going to read from the first story in the collection, which is often a favorite. I do all my own stunts. 1983. I used to ride Shadow, my black tricycle, with no hands. When I was 4, I managed to stand up on the hard black metallic seat while the bike sped towards the end of my block. I hit a bump, went flying over the handlebars, and landed face first on the concrete. The sting of my skinned knees, palms, and elbows, the blood rushing from my newly loosened teeth and throbbing in my head should have taught me a lesson. 1991. I hated the pink and white hand-me-down Huffy I got for my 11th birthday. It had U-shaped handlebars, a scratched up white frame, and a hideously soft pink vinyl banana seat. I hated that bike was pink and white. I hated that it had that long, ridiculous seat. Nevertheless, I rode that Princess Pink Huffy like the BMX I wished it was. I rode with no hands. I jumped off curbs. I pedaled as fast as I could and leapt off that thing like it was on fire, sending it ghost style up the alley until it slammed into a garage door or dumpster. It was a resilient piece of machinery, but one too many ghost riders sent me to my doom. One day, I rode full speed towards the bar of cement in front of our parking space to pop a wheelie I could be proud of, catch some air that would make me gasp. I made it to the cement bar. I pulled up at just the right moment. I screamed as the Huffy abandoned me in midair, diving forward as the handlebars and the bike frame parted ways. I landed on my back, blood from my lacerated tongue filling my mouth and U-shaped handlebars still in my sweaty hands. The damage was irreparable, and I spent the rest of the summer with no bike at all. 1994. I have never gotten a new bike. At 14, I was riding my father's blue Trek 10-speed. The bike was in fairly good shape, and had I aspirations for winning the Tour de France, perhaps I would have appreciated the lightweight frame, the ram horn, drop handlebars, and thin 27-inch wheels a bit more. Still, I whipped through the streets of my neighborhood with my 10-speed, switching gears and winding my pedals backwards to make that rattling sound that I thought was so cool. Riding that bike made me feel grown up. It made me feel fearless. And at the time, I believed those feelings to be one and the same. In a test to that sentiment, I walked into a neighborhood challenge, brave and hell bent on success. My sometimes friend, most times arch nemesis Randy, had a ramp. His father built it for him and would drag it out of the garage and into the center of the alley on weekends. Everyone in the neighborhood talked about the ramp. Who could jump it and who couldn't, who was scared and who wasn't. I may not have been properly equipped, but I could surely make the jump, and I most definitely wasn't scared. I decided to do it. Randy and his crew of lanky followers stood around waiting for me to bail. I did no such thing. Pedaling as fast as I could, knuckles stretched yellow around the curl of the padded handlebars, I zoomed toward that shoddy looking ramp. I went up the curve, caught a split second of air, and then slammed into the concrete below. I didn't fall right away. I just stood, paralyzed by pain. See, my hand-me-down 10-speed was made in the grand tradition of gender specificity. It was a men's bike. It was blue. It was fast. It had one of those heinous bars across the top of the frame. If I had had balls, I would have been injured into sterility. Having recently discovered myself, learning how to press and rub myself into a guilty explosion of heat and stifled gasps, I worried about the damage that could actually have been done. My clitoris, I thought, when and if it would stop stinging and aching, was most definitely broken. I finally fell over, grabbing my crotch and cursing through clenched teeth. A week later, I started my period, and though I knew better, I convinced myself I was dying. 2002. My girlfriend gave me a bike. It needed a little work, but it was the thought that counted. I had told her I wanted a bike, and she brought me one, just like that. It just needs a chain, Fada had said. A few months ago, when we broke up, I told her I didn't want to, but we did, just like that. I just need a change, she said. I would see her around the city, a bold contrast to everything around her, the city a blur of watercolor. In all of Chicago, only she was clear to me. Her body, modest breasts underneath a plain white t-shirt, no bra. Hips that gave life to jeans made to hug them, and her face, skin bright and electric as copper wire, large eyes and wide mouth hungry for experience. I would look at her and then look away. Fada wanted to be friends. I couldn't bear it. She would call me and I wouldn't answer. Her voice hurt my ears. My favorite memory of her and me is the night we stayed up playing chess until just before dawn. Fada had knocked over the remaining chess pieces, all of them, our queens, our kings, our ambling pawns, her knight and last bishop, the one rook I was holding on to. I was losing, but didn't care. Abandoning the game, we ran hand in hand the 3 blocks to Rainbow Beach. When we arrived, Fada wrapped her arms around me, resting her chin on my shoulder. We watched the sunrise on the rocky beach. Tell me some stories about you, she whispered. Her breath smelled like licorice. I told her my bike stories. She laughed at each one. Good thing physical pain is temporary, she had said, kissing me just beneath my ear. Every time I look at that white Trek mountain bike still sitting in the hall, still needing the chain, my throat double clutches and my mind begins to race. I remember everything about her: the dimple in her left cheek, the moon shaped scar behind her right knee, her loud head turning laugh, the way she ate baby carrots straight out the bag, and how she never washed her fruit and would roll her eyes at my threats that I wouldn't kiss her for the germs. Her hands on me, under me, the snot and tears and slob that dried shiny and stiff on my shirt when she fell asleep in my arms the day her grandfather died. The first time she told me she loved me. I struggle to switch gears. Riding the trek through memory is rugged terrain. I hit one rock after another, blinded by the light of the sun. Old wounds long since healed begin to itch and sting. My hands, my mouth. I slam on the brakes and my heart screeches, sliding, the tread a bit worn. I go flying forward, weightless, free, and happy, but just for mere seconds. The imminent crash into reality, already scraping my skin and breaking my bones. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. For a moment there, I just kind of got lost because I thought about my little pink bike, Rambling Rose.
Yes. Okay. Rambling Rose. That's
Rambling Rose went down the hill, whoop, up the ramp, fell off. So I had to kind of come back. But it made me think of just the power of what good writing does and how it connects us to story and our own story by way of someone else's story. So as we celebrate this collection, this 10-year-old collection, Once and Future Lovers, let's talk about the origins of the story of the book, the title, and how it came into being.
All right. So a lot of these stories, particularly in the original version, were stories from my time in graduate school. And so in 2005, I quit a corporate career to move to Chicago to be a writer. And during that time, it was such a ripe time for me. I wasn't out to my family just yet. It was my first time living away from my parents and my siblings. And so it was really I just felt kind of cracked open being there. And so I feel a special kind of affinity for the stories in this collection because they represent a lot of that longing and searching and desire and, really just like being in the space of discovery. And so there's stories in there that are, of course, informed by my own life, like a lot of writing is of mine in particular. This bike story features my bikes. The last section is fictionalized, but just during that time, I was really kind of exploring my identity, trying to figure out the way my heart worked or the way I thought my heart should work or could work. And so I feel like the stories are about that kind of exploration of love in all these different areas. So it's not just romantic love that's featured in the collection. There's familial love, granddaughter, grandmother love. There's siblings. There's father-daughter relationships. Just all these different kind of facets of love, which is kind of what informed the title, Once and Future Lovers. This idea, especially at that time, of me trying to say, like, or trying to ask, what is it, what can I figure out about love? And I was, during that time of writing these stories, I was completely baffled by it. And I still am in a lot of ways, but in a way that feels more hopeful than it ever felt before. So that's how that came to be.
I know there's a new cover, and I think maybe a couple of new additions.
Yeah. So the original cover was, I worked with artist Sharon Norwood, who's an excellent ceramicist. And then for this cover, I worked with Chastity Pasco, who's an excellent visual artist. And I wanted something, I guess, even though the original stories are from kind of that uncertain time, I added some newer stories that had come out in the space between, mostly because I kind of wanted, in celebrating the anniversary, for me, it's not just looking at the past, it's also standing in the present and then looking forward, right? And so I wanted the new cover to be bold and colorful and hopeful, and the added stories in here, I think, give it a little bit more of a hopeful kind of tint to it. Also, I edited the older stories a little bit. When I went back to look at the manuscript, I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I know people like that collection. But I am a stronger and more confident writer now than I was 10 years ago. And I feel like that's what you hope for as an artist, that you'll grow and develop in your craft. And so I went back, and part of me was like, well, some of these just can't be in here no more. Like that original one is out of print. And if you got these, like, I don't know, let's not pretend they didn't happen, but let's also say, you know what? She's a better writer now. And so I took a couple of them out that I just didn't feel as connected to. And then there's some in here that they just absolutely had to be in here again. And it was almost like visiting an old friend or this old version of myself. And I want to give shouts out to therapy, because in reading back some of the old stories and thinking of myself then, I also wanted to make sure that I stood in like this space of grace with myself. So it's like, not to say like, man, you really sucked 10 years ago, because I know I didn't, but also like holding space for growth and celebrating growth. And so there's the newer stories, and then a couple, the older stories have been revised and just kind of polished a little bit with the by the writer I am now. So yeah.
Well, you answered my next question, because
Oh,
I was
okay.
going to ask you about that, whether or not you edited any of the stories.
Yeah.
But also just about the and you probably touched on a little bit of this too, but the mindset of putting something out in the world, and then 10 years later having the opportunity of looking at it and making some assessment of its value, of its meaningfulness, of how it has grown in the span of those years. I mean, it's like having a kid and you see that 10-year-old. You can make all sorts of assumptions about that child, whether you like it or not. I'm not a mother, apparently. I suppose a mother wouldn't say that. But
a mother could dislike their kids.
Okay. But this idea of when you have taken the time and energy, you put something in the world, and being able to look at it and reflect upon it and say, well, this is not where I am today. It doesn't reflect my gifts. It must be a gracious act to be able to have that opportunity, because so many of us don't have that opportunity to look back on life like that. I think that's the gift that many people who are artists can do, and to do something like that. So it's interesting hearing you talk about it, its birth, and how you've been able to reshape some of those stories now.
Yeah. Well, it's also, and this is kind of a testament to when I'm thinking back to who I was 10 years ago, right? Like there's just been a lot of growth. And a lot of that growth wasn't, I guess it wasn't leaving behind this version of myself. It was just like embracing this older version a as a part of me, but a contributor to who I am now. And I think that helped a lot. So it's like not just looking back and kind of discarding, but like welcoming that older self and that past version into the fold and saying like, look who we are now. And so it's been really beautiful because I released this title independently, and in the space between, and part of me releasing it independently at the time is I was getting rejections all over town when I was sending out my manuscripts and even some of the short stories. And so putting this book out again also became a celebration of commitment and determination. Karis, as ER mentioned earlier, was one of the first supporters of this book. And as an artist putting work out independently, finding bookstores and other folks to kind of rally around the work is no small task. And so to be able to call these folks back, right? And I mean, it was a single email like, hey, Karis, what's up? I'm re-releasing this title. And they're like, yes, let's do it. Of course. And so what that also kind of affirmed for me is, even though I was kind of finding my way a decade ago, I was planting some seeds, and we were planting seeds as a community. And that felt really, really good. And that's the other reason I'm just like over the moon about this collection.
We don't have to go back 10 years. We can even go back 2 to 3 years and talk about just how the reality of COVID has shaped so much of the way in which creative work is produced and how people have been able to make their presence in the world via their own art. And I'm curious in the span of these past 3 years, since we're in a very reflective mood here, to hear your thoughts about how these past 3 years have not only shaped you and what you do at Kitchen Table Literary Arts, but how it has or hasn't, in your estimation, made space for other women, especially Black women, Black queer women, to be able to put their stories out into the space and have someone to read it and share it and celebrate it. What has the presence of COVID done for that possibility of publishing and people really being able to put their work out?
I know. I feel like it was a reckoning of sorts, and folks got a chance to see like who was really for them and who wasn't. And a lot of being an independent artist, and I consider myself kind of a hybrid artist of sorts because I do have traditionally published novels. And the publishing industry, I mean, it's a business, right? And that business is not always conducive to art making. And so what I saw with this kind of major disruption was a chance for, I don't know, I feel like, was I like Saul on the road to Damascus when the scales fell from his eyes? I feel like, I feel like people began to see institutions a bit, kind of seeing behind the curtain a little bit in a lot of ways. And what happened was a lot of the institutions or industries that we thought was for us wasn't really for us. And for those of us who are bold enough to say, you know what, I can do this. I can put my work out. I can start a podcast. I got a tripod. I can do a video and start my YouTube channel. I can see what kind of opportunities are available to put my book out. And so I feel like there was something to everything being laid bare that really opened up this opportunity for folks to be like, oh, let's go. Right. I forget who said, like, we're the ones we're waiting for. I feel like a lot of people felt like that when the pandemic hit, because it was such a challenging time. it was such a lonely time for a lot of people. You know, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Like, this was no small thing. This was like a big, listening to an album and then you start like that's what this was. It was disruptive to the track.
Right.
And there's opportunity in that. Like, as much destruction, out of destruction comes creation, out of ending becomes beginning. So I feel like a lot of people was tuned into that. And that's part of, I think we're seeing that now. All these voices and stories that people are being bold enough and sort of resisting the way things were done before, and taking more chances, and saying, well, what do I have to lose? Because this could all be gone, or this industry or institution may never support me. So what do I need to do? And then I need to do it now. And so there was also this urgency, I think, that opened up to folks just wanting to do their thing, which I'm really excited about.
What new opportunities did it present specifically with Kitchen Table Literary Arts?
So we had a number of programs that are really popular locally. We have a short story club called Sips and Stories. We had a retreat called The Getaway, and the tagline is write, sleep, repeat. And it was just, we got a house, we'd invite 5 to 6 writers, and we would just write all weekend uninterrupted. And that is, you talk about manna from heaven for a writer, like having uninterrupted writing time. We did a in-person, it was kind of like a book club, but we had a book club at the Dr. Carter G. Woodson African American History Museum. And then we had another reading series we called Community Conversations. And we would do so we did a year of Toni Morrison, we did a year of memoir, we did a year of Afrofuturism, and a year of international voices. And folks were coming, and it was so great to be in community around books by Black women and women of color writers. And then COVID came, and as the director, I mean, I kind of froze a little bit. Like, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't have any immediate models, I think, in my community about, well, what can we do? How can we pivot? So when we took some of the programs, we just had to stop. So The Getaway, we had to suspend. The book club, we were decommissioning that anyway. And so that just kind of sped it up. We took Community Conversations virtual. We took Sips and Stories virtual. So Sips and Stories was, you read the short story and then you meet for drinks at a local brewery. So we took that virtual, and Jasmine, my wife and financial director for Kitchen Table, was like, what if we did read the story, make the drinks? And so we curated the short stories with a featured cocktail, and you could make it. And we would also do a mocktail version for those who don't imbibe. And it was good. What I feel like it did, and what I feel like it did for a lot of organizations, was open up the accessibility. And so a lot of folks who might have seen what Kitchen Table was doing but weren't in Florida were now able to tune in. And so we had readers joining us internationally. I think we had some folks come through from Germany, from London. I think we had someone from South Africa one time. Like, it was really allowing us to have a different kind of reach with some of those programs. But at the same time, and it's weird to think about it now, Kitchen Table was already doing online creative writing classes. And we were one of the few kind of early organizations that was doing online creative writing classes. So when COVID came, what did everybody start doing? So we went to being like one of the few places where Black women and women of color writers could log on and be in community virtually for these creative writing classes, to now everybody's got online classes. And so it's kind of been, so at the same time that it opened up our reach, it also kind of put us in a more crowded playing field, which, came with its frustrations. But now that we're back doing some in person, we're still trying to find our way through. And I think we had talked a little bit about that, where it's like our folks wanting to come out, our folks not wanting to come out. Is it easier to just log on, and not have to put on no pants, and you can just, watch instead of drive and park and attend, So I think people, are still trying to navigate that too.
Mhm. Um, I want to get back to your reading a piece, but before we do that, I know we have one more short piece you're going to read. I can't help but to think about just the gift of writing and the gift of reading, and how Maya Angelou, I believe, was one who said, "Easy reading is hard writing." That it takes a lot to really do the type of work to connect someone like me with my rambling rose with your story about your bike, your pink Huffy. Um, and in an era where technology has been just full speed ahead, and probably because of COVID and everything that's has happened, and the whole presence of AI, I just have to ask you this question. Um, you have this technology, you have all this artificial intelligence, you have this software where you can just put in some words and have it be spewed back at you, and it's a beautiful love letter that you want to write to someone you love, or it's a story, or I mean it's something that is produced not necessarily by your mind, so to speak. Some people would question that, but just the whole presence of AI in writing and the future of writing. What does that mean? Is there any, in your estimation, any bearing upon what that will mean for people who are writers in the creative process and putting yourself out there? Is that something that people should be concerned about or in conversation with?
Well, I want to lift up your use of the word produce, right? Like, I feel like AI can produce some things. It can't create nothing, though. You know what I mean? Like, that's a different process to me. Um, when I was in grad school and when I left grad school, one of the ways I helped start paying back my school loans was I would do freelance writing. And so what I see a lot of AI being used for now is some of the stuff I used to do to make some money. So, like, cover letters and resumes and web content, and I wrote descriptions for a menu once. Like, AI is being used to do stuff like that, which I feel like, sucks, because that's a person's job. But in the same way, self checkout sucks. Like, that was someone's job, right? When it comes to creative endeavors, I feel like, and I don't want to use the word cheat because that doesn't hold the depth that I'm thinking of. It feels duplicitous in a way, right? So yeah, you could probably use one of these new apps, and a lot of the apps now are allowing for creative writers. They're offering like free trials. Of course they are, because they need the data, right? So they need writers to put their work into the machine so then it can build a database of metaphors and phrases and descriptions. So then later, someone can say, okay, write me a short story about a young Black woman figuring out her sexuality using bikes as an overarching metaphor, right? It can churn something out. It ain't going to make this. You know what I mean? And so I can't help but be conscious of it and know that it's absolutely something that's going to be on the scene. Who knows how it's going to be used? But I think if you are, with anything, there's people who want to cut corners, want to get rich quick, things like that. So I do see folks getting AI to write poems and things like that, and But then that becomes duplicitous because you didn't write it really, right? You use the machine to produce something that sounds okay, right? Um, and then also for writers, when I think about kind of the difference between like a writer and an author, right? An author is anyone who's published a book. A writer, which is how I refer to myself, is an artist. And one of the things I love about my art is toiling over the words. I love that easy reading is hard writing. I love the challenge of it, of trying to find the right description, of wrestling with sentences, of taking a draft of 12,000 words and trying to get it down to 7. Like, what I mean? Like that's what I love about what I do. And I think any writer who is an artist would absolutely reject using a tool like that, because it's in the way of the process of the process and the practice of it too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I can't help but to also think that there is this component of the writer and the reader and what we have today in conversation
Mm-hmm.
with reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would never know how you're reading that story made me think about my Rambling Rose pink bike
Yeah.
and going down the hill and going up my bike one way and me the other.
Yeah.
But having that opportunity to uh, hear your words and to visit that time and space and that connection is very meaningful. And I sometimes I can get kind of afraid of AI and think, oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
It's it's scary.
there's going to be all these little stories about pink huffies and and my Rambling Rose. But I think that it's just so important for us to kind of keep that on the lid, because when we think about what's happened with music, where you can go into your bedroom and produce an album,
Mm-hmm.
and you have all the software that makes it possible for you to play any instrument in that band. But some would say you can do that with a computer, but there's a difference between playing a MIDI controller and really playing a piano.
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
playing a keyboard.
And even what it demands of you, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
Toni Morrison talks about in the collection Black Women Writers at Work that was recently re-released because it was out of print for a long while. So in that interview with Claudia Tate, Toni Morrison talks about the sort of just the relational aspect of writing and how the writer and the reader are kind of coming together and creating something meaningful. AI ain't gonna do that, right? The things that will, come to an artist as they tinkle in the keys, a computer can't do that. Nothing's gonna come to the computer spontaneously, right? Nothing's gonna be birthed in their mind or in their heart because they ain't got one. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's always gonna ring a little hollow. It's always gonna stop short. And for those of us who are committed to seeing art do what it do, we're gonna recognize that, and we might not know exactly why it's a little off, but I feel like we'll be like, I mean, it was all right, but something about that, just because we do that with music too, right?
Yes. Yes.
We say, oh, that sounds good, but
yes.
it stops a little short,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
they're gonna keep trying because that's capitalism gonna capitalize, and it's gonna keep trying, but you can't do what humans do. I don't believe it.
Well, let's get into relationship again
Okay.
with a writer and have you read something to us.
All right. So I'm going to read just the introduction to one of the newer stories in the collection. This is The Liar. Opal was missing a finger. Well, not really missing it exactly. The pinky on her right hand was a nub. It stopped short, ended just at what would have been the second knuckle of her three-jointed appendage. Instead, she had a stump of bone, flesh and skin, no nail, that ended in a smooth roundness that tingled when rubbed directly. As far as she knew, she was born that way. She remembers doctors, therapists, teachers, and foster mothers always trying to get her to write with her left hand, but she refused. As a result, she only wrote with short, stubby pencils that she held like tiny pieces of chalk, her bunched fingertips, her thumb, index, middle, and ring fingers going pale in the fierceness of her grip. Opal never revealed the real story of her pinky or lack thereof to anyone. When asked about her finger or her mother, she always found it more interesting and, in the end, much safer to lie. Opal told people her mother's name was Lily, a name Opal chose after reading The Temple of My Familiar for the 9th time. The name was the first lie of many that would follow. Stretching the truth when necessary and downright inventing it when required allowed Opal to feel in control of her story, in control of her very being. She knew that one's personal story held a special power, a power that can invite people closer or push them away. She wanted to be in control of that power, always, especially when dealing with how, when, where, and if she shared her heart. When Opal took lovers, which she did liberally, she told them different stories about her mother and about her finger. The lovers marveled at the story, trying not to look at Opal at the nub as Opal spoke. Opal told January, a journalism student at UIC, that she lost her pinky in an unfortunate door slamming incident. The heavy, rusted passenger door of a 1985 Mercury Marquis clamped Opal's 5-year-old finger like a bear trap. And in a panic of pain and surprise, she yanked her hand away, jerking it up and out, the top portion of her pinky left inside the door. Yes, even as a child, Opal purported herself to be that strong. She told Maricel, a woman who'd only dreamt of snow until arriving at University of Chicago, that she lost her finger to frostbite, a wicked case that turned her fingertips from brown to red to yellow to white, then blue to black. The doctors could save them all except one. Opal told Marisol, "Don't buy gloves. Always get mittens. The fingers need to be together to truly stay warm." Tomorrow, a single mother going into social work got a story about a knife fight that went down at one of Opal's foster homes. For Mina, a factory accident working for a meatpacking company in Melrose Park. Kimora, a tale of a careless slicing accident from Opal's days working at a deli. "To this day, I don't fuck with pastrami," she has said. For Daisha, sweet, sweet Daisha, who was studying for her GED, Opal imparted a story about getting distracted by a fight that broke out in high school woodshop class and how the buster ass teacher, Mr. Kukla, gave her an F because she didn't finish her birdhouse. Never mind the bandsaw that severed half her pinky in an even cut worthy of an A. Unlike her lovers, Opal recycled her stories. She changed tiny details, the make and model of the car, a 81 Cadillac Seville, 78 Olds Cutlass, 85 Buick Skylark, the name and location of the deli, Ada's on Wabash, the Riverside on Cortland, even a Subway out by Ford City Mall. The woodshop project, a spice rack, Lazy Susan, lamp. The only details that never changed were the hospital, Cook County Emergency, where she sat bleeding down her arm, shirt front, lap, and floor until they finally called her name. And of course, the imminent loss of half of her pinky finger. The love affair would end shortly after the storytelling, something about the woman asking about the finger coinciding with a shift in the lovemaking from the figurative to the presumed literal. And perhaps that's what made Cree different. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wow.
That's to make y'all get the book.
Yeah. Like, read on, read on. You know, I when we talked about this this day a few months ago, I was excited because I thought that you were saving the best for last. But you're going on to Denver for another reading.
Yeah.
And it's been a busy tour for you.
Mhm.
You've been doing a lot.
Mhm.
How has it been getting back in the gear and getting things going post COVID? Is it too early to say post COVID?
It's with us always. I
Mhm.
think it's a wrap on that. Um, it's been interesting for a couple of different reasons. 10 years is a decade is quite a bit of time. I was just talking with my dad the other day, and he keeps saying um, the days are long, but the years are short. So he keeps saying that. And I was thinking back to when I was on tour with the collection the first time, and there were a lot of things that are challenging now that weren't challenging then, right? Like we'll just start with back pain wasn't the same thing that it is now that it was 10 years ago, um I didn't I mean I was dating my wife, but we weren't married, and so now there's other things to consider when hitting the road and being gone for a while. I am also like, travel is just different. Events are just different. And so all of those things are contributing to some of the challenges. However, there's been so many beautiful moments that I've had that are sort of, I guess, related to the disruption of COVID. I've been teaching creative writing classes not primarily, 100% online for some really excellent organizations like The Porch out of Nashville, Tennessee, Story Studio Chicago, Middle Tennessee State University, Gold Crown Literary Society. So I'm teaching all these classes, and I've only seen these people in these little boxes, right? And so going on tour, um, some of the folks that I've worked with for 3 years and never met them in person, I'm getting a chance to meet them in person for the first time. And it's just really warming my heart. It's like, oh, you're taller than I thought. And then getting a chance to hug and getting a chance to, to be in the same space at the same time. Cause I'm also primarily with the groups I work with, I'm in a different time zone too. So it's like we're actually in the same place in the same time. And that has felt really good. Really, really good.
Well, I've so enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
It's just like the last time we spoke. We could go on and on and on. So we'll have to make a point to continue having these conversations.
Yes.
This has been wonderful. And I know that I'm not the only one who could continue to be in conversation with you. We have guests in the audience who may have some questions that they would like to ask you. And so at this time, I will make it possible for those of you with questions for Sheree to ask her, and ER has the mic. Are there any questions?
I am curious if you've ever considered to turn the short story collection into an audiobook.
Oh wow. Yes, I have considered it. I have not yet done it, obviously. It's something that I think about. I guess another one of the challenges, and any independent artist can can definitely ascribe to this. It's just me. The marketing department is me. The the tour manager is me. The writer is me. I mean, I do anybody interested in self-publishing out there, hire an editor and hire a cover designer. Okay. You want your book to look just as good as the ones with hundreds of thousands of dollars behind them. So yes, it is definitely something that I would be looking to do sooner rather than later.
You're such an excellent writer, and obviously it's your passion. I'm wondering if you're working on something else right now and what's to come.
All right. I am currently working on my memoir, and we talked a little bit about it on the podcast. So then they're here to say it was way back in 2018. I'm like, man, I need to finish this book already. But I'm working on a memoir. It is a collection of essays, of personal essays, 4 of which have been published. So they are out in the world. You can find links to them on my website. This summer, I am closing my calendar to teaching and events to finish a draft of the memoir. I want to get it finished and start talking about the best way to bring it into the world. So that's what I've been working on. What I found, though, is I mean, I started in fiction, and fiction is my first love, but I'm finding this nonfiction work to be challenging and like really stretching me in a way artistically that I welcome, even though it is hard as hell. Like it is driving me crazy. And so I've been also kind of playing around with some fiction to kind of ease back off the creative nonfiction work because it gets kind of heavy. It's about my family. It's about kind of rejecting the binary when we talk about recovery and addiction, alcohol abuse, and so the content gets a little heavy, and so I kind of ease back and work on some fiction. So I've had 2 fiction stories come out and recently, Taiwo and Obsidian Lit. If you're interested, it's a little horror light, little creepy story. It's a little more than a different genre for me that felt good. And then I have a story about hot sauce, which is it's about activism and Black lesbians. It has quite a bit of sex in it, and it's it's in a really exciting anthology called Current, and all the proceeds go to Cooperation Jackson and Reproductive Justice Jackson. So the proceeds go to that work being done in Mississippi. So yeah, so the nonfiction work and then sneaking in a little fiction in between.
That way? Okay. I could so identify with your words, like Angela, like I could see myself there. I remember my bike accidents, right? And I was wondering, how do you get into the zone? Because it's so identifiable, right? How do you get there?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I don't know, and this is something that I wish I had answers for. And it's difficult to talk about in mixed company sometimes because writers know. Like I see a image or I'll hear a voice, and then I'll have to take it to the page. Like I just have to write it. If I don't, like, I don't know what would happen if I don't write it because I never not write it. But I just go to the page, and so when I'm writing, sometimes there's music involved. Sometimes I need the silence, but I don't know what, folks' spiritual leanings are. I don't know where this comes from. I'm thankful for it every day because I love it and it edifies me and it affirms me and who I am. But part of the work of being in the zone, I think, is committing myself to the time to do it, to sit and hold space for it. And then also having kind of this unshakable belief that if it's important to me, or that if it's curious to me, or if it's exciting to me, or is sad to me, or inspiring to me, then it will be for someone else. And so when I dedicate myself to telling it as fully as I can for me, I then believe that somebody else is going to also feel that. And I feel like that's the connectedness of like really good art. Like that's what it does. So it delights me to hear that you are able to see that and that you're thinking about your bikes and, that feels good.
So first of all, Opal sounds like a hot mess.
She is.
But I'm curious, speaking of inspiration, what inspired Opal? And I guess more specifically, what typically inspires your fictional characters?
Yeah. A lot of times it starts with like a central image or a question. And so for Opal, like when I saw her, she was like, I don't know. I mean, she's fine as hell. Like, I don't even know if I describe her in the book that way in a story, but she's like just really sexy. And I don't know why she's missing part of her pinky. And she wouldn't tell me. Right. So as I was writing her, I was like, this is kind of her thing. She's mysterious. And a lot of it had to do with this physical representation of what she felt like she was missing in her life and in terms of her identity. And that made me care about her in a different kind of way, because she is a mess. And I really like writing what others might call unlikable characters, because I always feel like it's something in there that that they're either trying to protect or trying to hide. And I think about the time I spent being unlikable in some, iterations of myself. And it was because I was trying to hide things, or I was trying to protect something. And so then it becomes, for me, a challenge to see, well, how much will they tell me? See, that's the part where I'm like, you can't talk about it in mixed company too much. Like, what you mean she wouldn't tell you? Like, and so for Opal and many of my other characters, there's usually a central image and then a question or something that I want to know about once they've, given me something to explore. But she is a mess. But she's trying. Yes, a hot mess. But she's trying. So that's a great question. Thank you.
So I think we have a special presentation by
do.
Angela.
Well, at ZAMI NOBLA and the ZAMI NOBLA Podcast, a sound source for Black lesbian herstory, we know that our work is possible because of folks like you who are so willing to share your story and to be vulnerable and open with all of the details. And so we want to give you something, you and your wife Jasmine, something to remember this moment by, because you're part of our village and you're a memory keeper by writing the work and by helping other folks learn how to do the same. Being a memory keeper is very important in villages. And so you are a village keeper. So we are giving you and Jasmine a ZAMI NOBLA mug with a coaster and a lid. And it says ZAMI NOBLA Village Keeper. ZAMI NOBLA Village Keeper. I designed this, so I should know what it says. But it's a nice little coaster and a lid to keep your.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But we're just not giving you that because we know when you have something as wonderful as maybe tea or coffee, and you're driving home, we just want to instill upon you just how you can enjoy something with that. And so we also threw in a couple of
the cookies. All right.
Homemade 3-ingredient
oatmeal
raisin cookies, which we knew you didn't have a chance for dessert today. So we want to give you something to enjoy on the ride home.
Thank you so much.
And Marion especially wanted to make sure that you'll have these. And
I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
I'll be glad to share the recipe.
Thank you so much.
But it has been our pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure's
You're
all
always
mine.
so gracious
Thank you.
and always so gifted. So, and this is also a reusable bag.
Okay,
Once
nice.
you finish it,
Oh,
you
it
can fold
folds up?
over and then it
Yes.
snaps even.
Yes.
So it snaps to the size of an envelope.
Okay.
So you can put it in your car pocket or something.
Yes.
It's really handy. So we're giving you something nutritious for your body and useful for the environment.
Thank you so much. In true
So-
Angela fashion. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you, ER, and thank Cheris, and I'll turn it back over to ER.
Thank you all both so much, and thanks for everybody being here with us physically in the house as well as virtually from around the world. We want to let our virtual friends know you can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy your copy of the 10th anniversary edition of Once and Future Lovers from Karis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. So thank you for doing that. And we will have Sheree signs. I keep wanting to call you Sheree.
It's a lot of E's
because
and
I love
R's.
it. I really just want you to be one name and just make it Sheree. Sheree Greer signed some extra books so that if y'all order online, you can get a signed copy while supplies last. So go on and click that teal button. And if you're not following the ZAMI NOBLA podcast, go on and do that as well on all of the podcast feeds. And thank y'all again for being with us. This event will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is just at Karis Circle on YouTube. So if there's somebody who you know would enjoy this and who should have been here today with us, go on and send that to them as soon as it is posted. So I'm going to say goodbye to you.